On November 17th, 346 of McGill's 700-plus student athletes were announced as recipients of the President's Student Athlete Honor Roll, recognizing academic and athletic excellence in the university's student athlete population. Women's track and field led all varsity teams with 34 recipients, followed closely by men's track and field with 27 of their own. 3 days later, McGill announced devastating budget cuts to its athletics programs and the dissolution of 25 varsity and competitive club sports effective next year. Amongst that list, men's and women's track and field, programs which have existed on campus for more than a century. The decision to cut the track and field program at one of Canada's oldest and most prestigious universities has quickly drawn the condemnation of the broader Canadian athletics community, while raising concerns about the future viability of similar programs across the country. A petition launched in the wake of the announcement to save the program has already garnered more than 11,000 signatures. Joining the show today is Derek Covington, head of Friends of McGill Track and Field, high performance director of Athletisme Quebec, and alumnus of McGill Athletics, where he was a multiple-time All-Canadian on the track. Derek highlights the critical role that McGill's track team has played as a development pathway for Canadian athletics talent, its importance to the broader track and field community in Montreal, and what McGill's decision means for the state of amateur athletics across the country. Derek, welcome to the Shakeout Podcast. So glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Happy to be here. Great to be here.
This has been a story that has been capturing the attention of the broader Canadian track and field community for a few weeks now. And for many of us, the decision by McGill came as a little bit of a shock, especially those a couple of degrees removed from the inner workings of the Montreal track and field community. First question for you, was the decision by McGill's athletics department to cut funding to McGill's track and field program, amongst other athletic programs under their purview, a surprise, or has this been a long time in the making?
Well, from a McGill perspective, their review has been ongoing for over a year, from what I understand. And I work with the McGill head coach, Dennis Barrett, in my role with Athletics Quebec as the high performance director. And I was aware of the review going on, as were everyone within the McGill community, both track and field, but all sports. But I would have to say that it was a complete shock to not only the head coach and to the athletes that track and field was cut from the program, but then, of course, myself and my role, I was also shocked, and I think everyone was not expecting that. Yeah,
it sent huge shockwaves through the athletics community. For our listeners who aren't as familiar with the context that this arose out of, can you give a little bit of insight into what led to the university's decision and for their rationale in reducing the slate of sports that they're supporting under the varsity athletics umbrella?
I think there was an overall message, two messages from McGill University. One is a intentional shift towards supporting recreational-based sports at the university for the entire student population. The second thing, there's a move towards cutting the roster of varsity sports that the university supports in favor of, with limited resources, to just then taking those same resources and then supporting a smaller number of sports. So those are the sort of the two overarching kind of, rationales provided by the university, which they have, even after the decision, kind of doubled down on as well, and in a media release. There's also some facility challenges related to the renovations of the track and other facilities within the athletics department, but of course overall with the overall buildings within the campus and stuff like that. So those are I would say, the three kind of overarching kind of directives that have been provided by the provost of the university.
I want to take a moment and hone in a bit on the facilities aspect of their decision. It's been one of the main talking points, certainly amongst the track and field community, that the loss of McGill's track and field program has a broader impact on the sport in Montreal and its surrounding areas, being one of the few facilities in the region as well as in the country that has a competition level track. Can you speak at all to the role that McGill has played within the context of the sport more broadly and the importance of access to this facility?
Yeah, for sure. The McGill Tomlinson Fieldhouse is is a key facility within the Quebec community. There's 4 indoor tracks in the province of Quebec. One at Claude Robillard, one at McGill, one at University of Laval in Quebec City, and one in Sherbrooke. And so being one of 4 key facilities, I think is important for us to be able to have support indoor track and field competitions during the circuit. The university circuit itself has 10 universities in it, so pretty much every university in Quebec is part of the RSCQ university circuit, and so it's probably one of the strongest conferences in all sports in Quebec, and so the not only taking a facility out of the picture to be able to host competitions, and McGill hosts an early season track meet called the Martlet Open, which they just hosted. They have a larger McGill Challenge, which is a highlight of everyone in the season. And this year they happen to be hosting the provincial championships for the university circuit. And I would say the other thing that McGill has, the track itself being a bank track, the only bank track in Quebec and one of 3 in all of the country. It's a fast track and people go there to run fast. And so it's an important facility for competitions, for the university circuit to be able to host university track meets, but also open track meets. So I think it's an important piece of the puzzle for Quebec track, not only from a competition perspective, but also from a training facility perspective. And I can talk a little more about the training facility as well and how it fits into our larger kind of ecosystem, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in your role as high performance director for Athletisme Quebec, as well as an alumnus of McGill, I think you're perfectly situated to talk about the role that it plays in high performance. I mean, that's been another central piece. There's been several high-profile Canadian athletes, Bruni Seren, a Montreal native amongst them, speaking to the importance of the community that McGill Track and Field fostered, as well as the facility access that it protected for so many years. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I think what's been really fun in terms of what's happening for track and field in Quebec is that there's been a growth of the sport at the grassroots level in terms of a general membership of track and field and road running in Quebec. And we've also seen at the top end a record number of athletes. You know, we had 7 athletes qualified in Paris compared to 1 in Tokyo. We've had another 7 athletes qualify for the World Championships recently. And we now have 14 carded athletes kind of thing. And so there's sort of been a general increase in interest in track and field. There's also been a resurgence at the higher end in terms of kind of carded athletes and national team athletes. We have our track and field center in Quebec City. We now have a provincial center in Montreal. Athletisme Canada 3 years ago established a national training center in Montreal, and that's where Audrey Leduc trains out of. And so they train primarily out of the Claude Robillard Center, which is on the other side of town. But often the Claude Robillard Center, because it's a shared use municipal facility, is often closed. So McGill is their other training center that they use on a regular basis. And so it's a key part of the ecosystem from a training facility perspective. And just kind of when you think about success of a larger sport, so McGill sits within a larger sort of club and club sports system, and so a program like University of McGill will benefit from that, and vice versa. So there's like a kind of an integrated aspect, especially I would say that's particularly unique in track and field. Because you can have athletes competing both varsity, but as I did, as well as doing the club track meets on both during the winter season, but also during the summer season as well.
It hits at what has come up a lot in the petition that's been signed by now, at last count, over 11,000 people, many of them athletes who have had an experience either as a varsity athlete at McGill or, like you mentioned, as a club athlete who benefited from the facility access that McGill's Track and Field Center offers, as well as the competitive opportunities that it offers. I love that you touch on the resurgence of the sport in Quebec. Many of the athletes that made up that Quebecois contingent at the Paris Olympics, as well as the Tokyo World Championships just this past September, are products of the RSEQ. They're athletes that chose to stay in province for their post-secondary education because of what you rightly mentioned is a very robust competitive landscape within the university system in Quebec and as well nationally. Are there fears at all that the loss of a program with the history and the legacy of McGill in some ways cheapens the product of the RSEQ as a competitive opportunity for athletes seeking to carry on in the sport and progress to those higher levels, such as Olympics or World Championships?
Yeah, I mean, McGill being one of the bigger programs, along with Sherbrooke and the University of Laval and the University of Montreal. Obviously, it's a key contender every year for the provincial title, both on the men's or the women's side of things, and of course, then being part of the larger kind of youth sport, national championships as well. So I think, I mean, I wouldn't use the word. It just sort of kind of weakens, I guess, and it's an important. Everyone wants a competitive field. Everyone wants the best on best, in a university context. And without McGill there, then you've kind of taken out a key piece of the puzzle there for competitors, but also just as a place to go for people who are at McGill University and wanting to run track in a competitive varsity environment. More and more at the youth sport level, national championships, you're seeing higher caliber results, and so it's a higher excellent kind of product, at the university level, both nationally, but then more and more provincially as well.
Derek, you yourself were a member of the varsity team during your tenure at McGill. You were multiple-time All-Canadian in the short hurdles. How did your involvement as a student athlete during your education at McGill shape your experience on campus?
Back then, we didn't actually have a nice indoor field house like they do now, and we would find ourselves running on the asphalt underneath the stands at Molson Stadium in the wintertime, doing tempo workouts and stuff like that. And I would say that it was a formative or an anchoring experience for me. I had my academics. I did track outside of university, but I would say that the track I did within the university kind of broadened my experience as a university undergrad experience, sort of socially, community, and then being able to kind of represent the university in a kind of a team environment and the connections that creates, and then being able to kind of, in my case, be competitive nationally, with the coming second and then first in the 60-meter hurdles. I mean, all of that was an extremely formative experience for me, and then kind of helped me both not only in my track progression, and that's a key part of this, is that even if you're going on to the kind of top levels of international levels, that the varsity experience is integral to even an athlete going on to sort of world-class levels. So I think that, as an experience, I think it was a well-rounded out my experience as a university athlete. Both, helped my academics. There's lots of research around dual careers and making sure that, as an athlete, competitive athlete, that your academics in one supports the other, and then just the connection and the experience. And then to this day, however many years later, the fact that track and field is still a community that's important to me, in particular the community around the university. So those are the bonds that kind of stick around for a lifetime.
Yeah, and an important thing to consider for those athletes still at McGill who it played such a critical part of their experience. I love that you mentioned the ties between athletic excellence and academic performance. Days before this announcement was released by the athletic department at McGill, they held their annual gala recognizing recipients of the President's Student Athlete Honor Roll, those athletes who have achieved a 3.5 or higher GPA. Leading the charge for, I believe, multiple years in a row was the women's track and field program with 34 recipients, the men's track and field program very close behind with 27. So right there you have over 50 athletes, a big bulk of the McGill track and field program, who are excelling both in the classroom as well as on the athletics field. And it seems to me like robbing those athletes of the opportunity to do both is potentially going to direct them away from McGill. Do you think that this has repercussions for the broader student culture at a university like McGill that's prided itself for hundreds of years, really, in their case, on developing well-rounded members of society beyond simply academics or athletics, but really combining those two things?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned about the President's Student Honor Roll, and where both the women's team was first among all sports, and then the men's team was third among all sports. And then I think it just speaks to the values that McGill upholds, both academic as well as being well-rounded, and to include active participation in sports. And so that's what makes this decisions, particularly around track and field, sort of one of the things that's kind of quite perplexing about the whole thing is that our track athletes are not only excelling on the field, but also academically. And so it kind of speaks to exactly the kind of athletes that McGill wants to develop and nurture and be part of the institution. These are some of the points that we're bringing back to the university now as it relates to how we're kind of trying to understand how they came to the decision of excluding track and field.
And how has the news been received by the current crop of coaches, of athletic trainers, and of course of student athletes currently on the McGill roster?
I mean, I think you can imagine it was devastating. Came out of complete left field. Everyone was not something that was at all expected. So the athletes themselves were very quick to rally. There are 6 team captains, and the 6 team captains all kind of got together to launch the petition, launch the open letter, launched our Instagram page. There's an internal recourse for this decision that they're pursuing as well. And so we really kind of, well, after they got over the initial shock, was like, okay, well, let's how are we going to kind of rally together around this and get our program reinstated. Exams started this week for them, so the timing was absolutely horrendous, because they're focusing on this when they should have been focusing on their academics. And so there's been a huge mobilization that from within the athletes that are on the team right now. They had as I mentioned earlier, they had their Martlet Open just last weekend, which kind of gave them a kind of a way to focus themselves around track right before the exams. There was a couple of excellent results there, and so we're just kind of, and then the alumni kind of rallied around the athletes, and so now we have, and then the petition. So even amongst the family and friends of McGill Track and Field, we have about 150 in a close kind of in a Facebook group as well that are all kind of working together to kind of see how we can open up a dialogue with the university around this decision.
And what does the path forward look like with a dialogue? The university has really doubled down in past weeks on their decision, saying that it's final. Is there hope to save the McGill Track and Field program in your eyes? And what does that path forward towards rescuing the program look like?
Yeah, I think we have a kind of a multi-pronged approach. One, we have, if all your listeners go to Save McGill Track Instagram page. On the Save McGill Track Instagram page, you'll find a link to our website. On that website, there's some resources there for you to write a letter to the president and the provost and the executive director of the athletics department. There's some tools there for you to be able to do that, and some contacts, of course, and then to kind of personalize it for your own experience. And what we found really heartening is that the outpouring of support from the United States, from all across the country, people who are trackies, but then also people who just believe in varsity sport and the role that it plays in a university experience. And so there's been kind of an outpouring of support across the community. And so if everyone were to write a letter to the university, then they would certainly feel that. And as they have, because I have spoken to people within the university, and they're kind of getting it from left, from all sides. And so that's been really one thing that we encourage everyone to do. Anybody who hasn't signed the petition, please go and sign the petition. You'll find the link on the Save McGill Track Instagram page. We've requested a meeting with President of the university, Deep Sani, not only from the Friends of McGill Track, but includes representatives from Athletisme Canada, Athletisme Quebec, other prominent track and field athletes like Bruni Cern and Audrey Leduc, as well as alumni, and then the team captains and stuff like that. So we just kind of want to open up a dialogue with the university to sort of see, okay, well, for all the reasons, even looking at all of their own criteria that they set out for the inclusion or exclusion of programs, track and field pretty much ticks every single box. So we're just sort of trying to kind of understand, like, how did they come to this conclusion around cutting track and field in particular. And then we've also going to be launching a pledge and a fundraising campaign, not only to kind of keep the program alive operationally, but then also look at longer term from a facility perspective and being able to see how we can work. So we're working with the university to sort of see how we might do that. There's been lots of examples in the United States where these types of decisions have been reviewed and for all the right reasons, for the good of not only the McGill University, but also for track, that we can sort of maybe have a second look at things, even though that they have decided that this decision is final. And so we'll never give up, whether it's so we'll just keep plugging away until it gets reinstated, basically.
Talk about the criteria that McGill itself used, first in their internal audit and then in a secondary audit conducted by KPMG. Are you able to speak at all to what the criteria was for McGill Athletics to either cut or retain varsity programs, and why track and field was amongst those that they decided to remove?
Well, there are some general principles related to strength of the RSCQ circuit, the overall competitive performance and potential of the performance of the teams. There was recruitment potential. There was financial, overhead of a particular program or not, whether we're talking about track or any of the other sports. Staffing needs, sports related to sort of safety and security of athletes, having protocols around particular sports and things like that. Also within the RSCQ network, there's a grouping system. It's a group 1, group 2, group 3 sport. So athletics is categorized as a group 2 sport, as is cross country. And so having cross country, which is closely linked to track and field, treated one way. The track cross country program was kept, but the track program wasn't kept. And so it's now, they're two closely linked sports, and to have one go one way and one go the other way, it's sort of perplexing. So, and of course, without a track program, it's hard to recruit for the cross country program, because the two of them kind of go together. So we're just, we haven't actually, there's been nothing been released around any of the reports about how they did the evaluation. So we just kind of want to just, sort of talk to them and sort of see if, try to understand basically, and sort of see if there's things that, if there are some things that a gap analysis they want to see on track and field in particular, to hear what those are, and then to, put a plan together to kind of address those things to be able to kind of have the program reinstated.
You mentioned that cross country is being kept. That's an important reminder to our listeners that the cross country program has yet to be culled. But you talk about kind of that disconnect between retaining one sport that's so closely tied with another. And another piece that's been a part of the larger conversation around McGill's decision with regards to the sport landscape at that school. More generally, beyond the track and field level, is a disproportionate number of women's programs have been cut. Now, in the case of track and field, both the men's and women's programs have been cut, but it speaks to the decrease in diversity that they're creating on campus. There will be more student athletes who are male than there are female. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I wonder if you can speak at all to the specific role that track and field situates itself well in terms of attracting a very broad diversity of types of athletes, just with the nature of the sport.
I think track and field is known globally as one of the most accessible sports, and the one that's the most, one of the greatest sports participated globally. And so it has a very strong base. It's very inclusive. Track and field across all disciplines is a very diverse group. There's gender equity as well. At youth sport, there's also a para component, and so it has all of the foundations of what makes a strong sport, and also a sport that most academic institutions want to have in their program, because it upholds all of those aspects that speak so clearly to the values that McGill University wants to uphold as an institution, as it relates to a global leader, as it relates to an institution that's representative of all different backgrounds. So, and to be able to attract all those people to the university, and earlier to your point about having a strong academic honor roll within the track program itself, but there's so many reasons why track and field is the right kind of program that most academic institutions around the world have, and I think is a good fit for McGill.
We will, of course, provide all of the links in the episode description for our listeners to get involved, to add their voice to the work that you and the Friends of McGill Society, as well as the team itself, are doing to save this valuable program. 125 plus years of history, and we certainly want to see that history continue well into the future. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, John.
It's been a pleasure. Derek Covington is a former student athlete and All-Canadian as a member of the McGill Martlet's track and field team. He's the high-performance director of Athletisme Quebec and currently serves as the head of Friends of McGill Track and Field. To add your support to the efforts to save McGill's track and field program, be sure to visit friendsofmcgilltf.ca and follow them on Instagram @SaveMcGillTrack. A link to the petition to reinstate the track and field program is available in the show notes of this episode, along with more information on how the Canadian track and field community can support this storied program. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X @ShakeoutPodcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. That's it for this week's show. I'm your host, John Gay, saying thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon for your next Shakeout.